From Variety, celebrating more than 120 years covering the business of entertainment, this is the Award Circuit Podcast. Blue Moon star Ethan Hawke has never tried to get tripped up by the Oscar race.
I remember Phil Hoffman telling me that the two hardest things about our life were failure and success. That failure had been brutal on him, and success had been hard in a different way. He was the first one of my generation to win an Oscar. Not only did he win, he deserved it. And it was like watching one of your contemporaries become fully mature artist. And he would talk pretty openly about the challenges of that, the way it affected your self-esteem and your ego in positive and negative ways. That I think it's part of why it's so hard for young people, because it can kill your drive.
I'm Michael Schneider. On this episode of the Variety Award Circuit Podcast, we talk to Blue Moon star Ethan Hawke about legacy, loss, and his transformative performance. Also on this episode, Frankenstein star Oscar Isaac. It's all next on this edition of the Variety Award Circuit Podcast. Stay close. Ethan Hawke has 4 Oscar nominations and no wins yet. But he continues to do award-caliber work, currently on TV via FX's The Lowdown and in film via Richard Linklater's biopic Blue Moon. In the film, Hawke delivers one of the richest, most emotionally lived-in performances of his career. The film, which imagines songwriter Lorenz Hart facing his own obsolescence on the night of the premiere of Oklahoma, has already become one of the most talked about dramedies of the award season. It took 12 years for Hawke to age into the part. Over a dozen years, Hawke and Linklater met periodically to read the script, refining it with screenwriter Robert Kaplow between sessions. Blue Moon arrives via Sony Pictures Classics, one of the few distributors still championing mid-budget adult dramas in an algorithm-driven landscape. On this episode of the Variety Award Circuit Podcast, Variety Chief Awards Editor Clayton Davis sits down with Ethan Hawke to discuss his transformative performance in Blue Moon, as well as his legacy, loss, and why Denzel Washington once told him that losing was the best thing that could happen at the Oscars. Clayton began by asking Hawke what drew him to the role.
I don't know that any other director working would have ever thought of me for that part.
Really?
And it says a lot about our friendship, I think, that he knew that character was in me.
Yeah.
And he curated that performance. He gave me that script 12 years ago.
Really?
And we got together, we did a reading of it at my house, I remember, and I was like, I love this, let's do this thing. He's like, not yet. Mm-hmm. I was like, all right. And we waited about 18 months, and we had some notes in the script to make it better, and Robert had some ideas, and he's a professor, the guy who wrote the screenplay. He's really a brilliant man. But that's not how he makes his living, screenwriting, right? So he just worked on it for a little while, sent us a new draft a year later. 6 months after that, we got together, did a reading. We did that again about 3 times over the next 6, 7, 8 years. And then finally, Rick felt we were ready. But I think largely he was waiting for me to get older. Mm. And I mean, most directors...
One of the rare things in this business to hear.
Most directors won't wait for an actor for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
They feel like you're not available the day I want to start shooting, then I'll get somebody else. They usually think we're pretty interchangeable.
He didn't want to age you up or anything. He said he wanted you to actually be as close to as possible. Because how old is he supposed to be?
He's in his late 40s.
Late 40s?
Yeah. And there's a sadness about Larry Hart. For people that don't know, the movie focuses on Lorenz Hart. It imagines, Rodgers and Hart had written together for 25 years. They were basically the Lennon and McCartney of their generation. They're on the cover of Time magazine. Virtually their whole canon is done by all the great jazz greats that we all know. But Larry became impossible to work with because of his drinking, and Rodgers started working with this young guy named Oscar, went on to be Rodgers and Hammerstein. And so this writer brilliantly imagines, he'd heard once that Larry Hart went to the opening night party of Oklahoma, which was, Rodgers and Hammerstein's first collaboration. They would go on to change musical theater, but he just imagined, what would that be like? Because Larry Hart, my character, would be dead within a few months of that party. And what would that have been like for him?
As the movie when you were filming it, and even now afterwards, especially when you talk about your experience working with Sydney, afterward, do you start reflecting? Does it force you to reflect on like your own legacy and what like your contribution to the art form? Obviously, Larry contributed a lot, but do you ever stop and think about what you've been able to give to the biz?
I think it's such a dangerous way to think. I'm reaching an age where people make me think about it. You know, like
Yeah.
you talked about going to the Telluride Film Festival and they show this clip reel of your whole life, and it's a strange thing. I've felt like a cat my whole life, like just getting dropped off buildings, trying to land on my feet, trying to stay alive, trying to keep having a career. I feel so grateful to still be doing it, and even more than still be doing it, to still love it. And you know, they just did a 10-year anniversary of Before the Devil Knows You're Dead. It was a few years ago now, but there was some film festival had a screening of it. And it was so sad. Yeah. It was so sad not to be there with Phil or Sydney. So to get to still be here but thinking about things like legacy starts you thinking about yourself in the third person. And it's just, either way, you either wind up vain or bitter, right? There's no kind of good that comes from that conversation. You can feel like, wow, I'm doing a great job. Or you can think like, wow, John Lennon died at 40 and he got all that done, and I'm 15 years older than him. Yeah. That's depressing. Like, what am I doing with my life? I mean,
a lot of that happens. You start comparing yourself. You're like, God, like you got this done by that age, and I'm still trying to figure it out sometimes.
But I do feel, back to Blue Moon, grateful that somehow Rick, in his patience and something about his character, he really looks at things deeply. And I think he saw what the next 10 years of my life was going to bring when I didn't. The last 10 years of my life have been making a slow transition to doing more character acting. When I was younger, I was just playing variations on a theme through every performance. And it kind of started, it took a big leap for me playing John Brown, but even Chet Baker and small films like Maudie and Magnificent Seven were all turns I was making towards doing what people call character work. And so this performance let me do that kind of work in a leading role, which was interesting.
Yeah, and I think when I think of you and your career, I'm always very fascinated by those different hats that you've worn, because you've been a leading man, you've been a great character actor, supporting role, you've written movies, written songs for movies. You really are, I think, just in love with the whole art form of movie making in a way that a lot of people are not. Was that intentional, like, for you when you started out?
You can't help that. You can't try to do that. It's just my personality. And when I was younger, I would get in a lot of trouble with it. I'm one of those people that runs before he walks. Mm-hmm. You know, I started writing before I knew how to write or had any, legitimate right to write, so to speak. But I loved it, and I was really worried about the longevity of the life of an actor. I just saw it all the time, and so I wanted to have other passions. And it's helped me stay curious. Making documentaries. I've written graphic novels. I've written songs. Something about it keeps you in touch with, for lack of, the person I was when I first started acting. It's you want to somehow keep in touch with your childlike love of this profession, the thing that you looked at where you just thought all of it was going to the Cannes Film Festival would be amazing. You do it 5 times and you start to like, this hotel isn't nice and these people are rude and it all. But you got to stay in touch with that part of you that just saw it all as magic, and still keep learning and not be a moron about it. So you can accumulate wisdom and use it without letting it trample the joy. And so for me, doing different things makes me think like a kid, makes me think like a student. And then I bring that back to acting. What if this is my first part? Even though I was something like Blue Moon, it's kind of frustrating to me sometimes because one of the magic tricks of the movie is Larry Hart was much shorter than I am, and it was a big part of his self-esteem and his identity, and it was an aspect of the character that I thought was extremely important. And if it was my first movie, it would be an easy trick to pull off.
Nobody would care.
They wouldn't even think about it. But I'm an old ham, and so everybody's like, "Oh, what's happening?" So they're watching you work a little bit, which makes me super uncomfortable. But such is life.
Let's talk about the cast. In particular, Andrew Scott, who's like really great, and he's someone I've been paying attention to, and like just want him to get some really good parts. I feel like sometimes the business is trying to figure out what to do with actors when they're that talented and can do a lot. And here he's so well utilized, and I would never, again, wouldn't think of him for a Rick Linklater movie at some point, but fits perfectly into that world. What was it like, lack of a better term, sparring with him a little bit?
Yeah, we do some sparring. I saw him do Hamlet, I don't know, 15 years ago, and I remember I saved the program and brought it home and wrote his name down in my journal because I was just like, this guy is amazing. I had no idea who he was. I don't even know what possessed me to go see Hamlet, except that maybe I had some hours to kill or something. And I'd seen him. You know, when you see somebody when you don't know and you write their name down, I've just kind of tracked his whole career. You'd see him in this and see him in that. And then we had the idea that, wow, he would be amazing. Because Rogers had to be somebody who walked into a room and carried a tremendous amount of charisma. Yeah. And also was believable that they had the intelligence of Richard. Richard Rogers, one of the greatest musicians of all time. So who's got to have that swagger about him, has to be younger than me, and has to be able to work the way that Rick works. You know, Rick is, he's so much like Sidney in a lot of ways. He's one of the few directors I've ever worked with that he cannot not rehearse. He doesn't see the rehearsal process as like getting ready to make the movie. It's making the movie. So when he asks for 5 weeks rehearsal before the shoot, people are like, well, I only have 5 scenes. Like, can't I just come in and do my scenes? Like, not for this movie. You know, that it's not.
He does that for all his movies.
Everything. He doesn't know how to do it without doing it. Because so much of what makes his movies different is the nuance and the kind of lived-in feel of the characters and the behavior. And he wants to be able to invite the actors to be creative. And that's what Sidney did too. It wasn't a waste of time. It was an incredibly creative experience. I remember watching Philip Seymour Hoffman and Marissa Tomei and Albert Finney and Rosemary Harris and all these people. In the rehearsal room, you can have really bold ideas like, well, should we cut this scene? And if you say that on set that day, you're being rude and hostile, right? Because but if it's 5 weeks before shooting, and then Sidney gets to say, well, I really love this. Why would you even say that? You say, well, I don't even know why I say these 4 lines. Maybe these 4 lines are wrong. Maybe I can take this time to explain to you. But there aren't 150 people waiting for you, which just really crushes any kind of creativity.
Yeah, it also gives you anxiety. I feel like everyone.
It's not any fun. Yeah. And so Andrew is a creature of the theater. He loved to rehearse. We had these long 12-page scenes. Those aren't hard for him. No. He's just finishing doing one-man show of Chekhov. You know, I mean, the guy can do anything. But he was a natural fit in our band.
It's interesting you describe it as a band, because I often have tried to think about what does a Richard Linklater troupe feel like, his regulars, and it does feel like a band. You guys are making music together in more ways than not.
I want to tell you one funny story about Andrew that I was so impressed by. We had a huge scene. It's like 7 pages, just the two of us. We have to walk up and down this stairwell, and we're fighting and we're crying, and we have to try to put the whole 25-year friendship into this scene, and it was extremely difficult. And figuring out the music of the scene, is it slow? Are there a lot of pauses? Yeah. Are they constantly overlapping? Is it a combination of both? Where would the anger come? How would the anger manifest? And it was a long and tedious day. And when I'm acting, I would go to my dressing room and I'd change and I'd leave my phone in my dressing room. And so I don't look at it till I wrap that day, right? So I'm getting changed. I pick up my phone and my wife is texting me, make sure you congratulate Andrew. I'm like, congratulate him on what? And he just gotten 19 Emmy nominations or something. And I went to him and he was washing his face in his dressing room. I said, hey, congratulations. He's like, oh, thanks. And I walked away. I was like, he never mentioned it. He never stopped for 10 minutes to say, hey, I'm going to call my agent or his phone didn't ring. He wasn't texting people like, yay. Yeah. He just worked all day long and he worked really hard. Yeah. And I went home that night. I was like, wow, he really fits in this troupe.
Oh, it's because he's incredibly humble in a way. Because even when you talk to him about like how, I saw him in All of Us Strangers.
Yeah, he was phenomenal. I saw that at Telluride.
Oh yeah,
it was magnificent.
Him was like balling in a room, and I was like, dude, like it's incredible. And he's like there's a lot of people like that like. I love it when they don't know how great that they are.
Yeah, what's great about film festivals is we actually don't know.
Yeah.
We're still waiting kind of to like, how are people going to react to that? He has scenes in that movie that levitate. Mm-hmm. There's a couple, those scenes he has with his parents.
Oh my God.
They're like next level good.
Jamie Bell and Claire Foy, I really lost it in a way. Like I cried a lot in Telluride. Telluride's
well, that's because of the elevation.
Yeah, that's what it is. When you think about, I want to ask you something about Blue Moon because Sony Classics, and the current time that we're in this industry, Sony Classics is just one of those guys, and I'm a big fan of Michael Barker and Tom Bernard, but it's also. They're still doing the work to make sure movies like this are getting made in a time where the algorithm is supposed to determine what movies get made or whatever. Are you grateful for guys like those? But also, are there more people like that out there that aren't getting the credit for doing stuff like that? There's like that adult cinema that's like stay alive.
There are more people out there. There are some renegade distributors, Oscilloscope, Music Box, that are really fighting to give the world to celebrate cinema as an art form. It has become such big business, and people have learned that there is a lot of money to be made off of it. Now, the problem with that is you take any half-decent restaurant and you turn it into a chain, right? Well, there's going to be diminishing quality. It happens every time. It's impossible to do. Michael Barker and Tom and everybody at Sony Pictures Classics, it's starting to become staggering, their commitment to their own ethos. Mm-hmm. It's if you know them a little bit, you know how hard it is. Because for every, crouching tiger, hidden dragon they have or whatever, they're making dangerous bets all the time. And I never get mad at studio executives and people like that. I understand that they could be fired this Christmas.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, if the movie doesn't work, hell, I'm going to go find another job. I'll act again, And, maybe I'll get good reviews and I can feel good about that. But if the movie doesn't make money, they get fired.
Yeah.
So we have a different criteria of what we're using of how to define success. Yeah. I love movies that have a long tail, meaning the biggest award I could ever win would be seeing a full-page spread on the 25th anniversary of Before Sunrise in the New York Times. I was like, wow, they didn't give us a full-page spread when the movie came out. Yeah. Like, we barely got any time. And it's 25 years later, and people are still talking about this movie. You bringing up Dead Poets Society at the beginning of this interview, that is amazing. Now, that's great for me. Yeah. The people who made Before Sunrise didn't make a penny off of it. Right? They might have lost their job over it. Yeah. So I'm reaping the benefits of that long-term art. So you have to be generous as a person who's working in the arts to understand there's a huge community of people that are trying to celebrate great work and trying to get good work out there. But it's a cutthroat business, and guys like Michael and Tom, they just keep doing it.
And I think what you described is it's almost, and this is becomes kind of our fault. I say our fault. Film Twitter, people who cover it, there's an oversimplification about like, for when people say no to movies, there's two agendas to it. And like what I love about Michael and Tom in particular, they're bottom line guys, but I know they love movies. Like, and I can, like, there are so many conversations I've had with them where we're just shooting the shit about movies, and it's my favorite pastime.
They'll geek out about it. I was in a car with Michael the other day, and he's just nerding out on a couple shots that were wrong in a movie I did 6 years ago, and he just has to tell me. And and it is, I'm like, wow, this guy cares.
Yeah.
And his commitment to Almodovar, he bought Slacker. So here I am, it's 30 years later, and here I am with another Richard Linklater movie, and his commitment to finding new voices, championing people from all over the world. I wish more people prioritize that, because I do think that if all you give people is hamburgers, they're going to eat hamburgers. And they're not going to complain much because hamburgers are good. But if you did make other meals, they would enjoy eating other things too. And if you don't make One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest available to people, they're not going to know that it's great.
And I argue this a lot in my job. I've been in this gig now 5 years. And the first thing I ever wrote for Variety, when I introduced myself to how I was going to cover award season, was I have cinematic blind spots, as we all do. And I grew up in the Bronx in a very like poor neighborhood. And my opening was like, I've never seen Casablanca. Like, it's just one of those movies that I've never seen. And I know I can watch it in 2 seconds. It's 90 minutes. I've kind of held it as being my thing, but it was more to prove a point. Like, there are some movies that mean a lot to me that some people are like, wait, really? Like, Dead Poets Society, I feel like a lot of people have seen it, but no one... But the way I talk about it just means different. But then I also talk about White Man Can't Jump in the same way. I love, like, most movies of my life, because there are movies that took a role in making me who I am.
Well, yeah. I mean, I went to go see there's movies, I can think of so many that, Platoon, Do the Right Thing. I had a great time with White Man Can't Jump too, but where it's not just the movie. It's where it impacted me on that particular Saturday afternoon. What I remember, the Rite Aid down the street from us when I was in high school went out of business, and they were giving away their VHSs, and I got Tom Hanks in Volunteers. I got Peter Weir's, what's the one with Mel Gibson and Sigourney Weaver? It's great.
Wait, not Mad Max. Keep going. I'll get it for you. This is one of the things we can cut.
The Year of Living Dangerously.
Okay,
The Year of Living Dangerously and Repo Man. I had those 3 VHSs. I have those 3 films memorized. They're really important films to me. Is it because they're so great? They actually are great, but they're great to me because I watched them 15 million times with my brother. Every sleepover I had, it was like, which one do you want to watch?
Yep.
And if the guys were over, they want to see the comedy, we see that. If it's, if somebody's into a romance, we have. And if the real cool kids would go with Repo Man.
I love those rummage memories of just like, I remember going to Blockbuster and just like.
But that's what movies mean to us. And having a variety of things. I mean, it's part of the thing that I love about, if I'm allowed to say this, what I have enjoyed about my career is that it's been so multifaceted, that I have a sincere love of a lot of different genres. And part of it has to do with how many mentors I've had. I was 14. I did Explorers with Joe Dante, who'd done Gremlins and The Howling. And he was coming at it with the Roger Corman ethos of like, he loved Bergman. He loved, quote unquote great films, but he also would get completely turned on by comic book movies and what could be possible inside genre. Then I met Peter Weir, who would take us to the museum, so show me Andrew Wyeth paintings and talk for 4 hours about the difference between John Lennon and Paul McCartney, and and exposed me to a different way of thinking about art. Then I meet Richard Linklater and Julie Delpy, who are obsessed with European cinema. And, you're sitting there in these conversations like, I've got to figure out who Fassbinder and Romer are, or I'm going to be left behind. And see, I've had all these different teachers, and I see lots of different boxes to play in.
Yeah.
Whereas I think a lot of people grow up and they kind of have one kind of reason they're becoming an actor, one thing that they want to do. And I've been exposed to so much.
Yeah. The way you speak about it, there's playing in the sandbox, and playing with the different toys that are available. That's what the movies are. You don't have to just stick to one thing. I want to, because we are sitting here in the middle of award season. You're with the chief awards editor of Variety. So you can allow me to do this part for you, but I am hyper aware of you having 4 Oscar nominations, but there's no statuette in your house yet. And I call you one of the sneaky 4-time nominees because people don't remember that 2 are for acting and 2 are for writing. So I want to just, with you, I want to go back in time to 2001 when you got your first nomination for Training Day, and Denzel won the Oscar that year. But can you recall that moment in time when you got that do you remember that season? Does it stick out for you?
Are you kidding? Does it stick out?
Well,
Yeah, I remember, first thing I'll tell you is I remember the world was a little different, and I was not even aware that the Oscar nominations were coming out that day. Mm-hmm. And I took my 4-year-old Maya to her preschool thing, and the preschool teacher told me I'd been nominated for an Oscar.
No way.
Her name was Odette, and she had tears in her eyes. She said, "I was just on the radio. It was just on the radio." And Odette is wonderful, and I love her, but she's also very emotional, and her heart on her sleeve, and she could have heard wrong. You know, I remember being like, "All right, thanks, Odette." But I was like, "Is this even possible?" And then I went home, and there it was on CNN, and I was just like, "Wow, that is cool." And I had a dentist appointment that morning, and if anybody knows my acting well, you know that I haven't spent a lot of time at the dentist, and I used it as just another excuse not to go.
Listen, I'm a little busy now.
I'm not going to the dentist this morning. And I'll tell you, I hope he wouldn't mind.
Yeah.
Denzel called, and he said, "You know why I'm so happy you were nominated?" And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because if you got nominated, that means people saw the movie. And if people saw the movie, I'm going to win."
You know, I'm a treasure trove of useless facts that don't really help you at all, but I'll give you a fun fact. Denzel Washington's second win for that movie, when it was his second Oscar, is the last time that someone won an acting Oscar on the night without winning any precursor before that. He lost the Globe, SAG, BAFTA, which he's never been nominated for a BAFTA, which is still a crazy fact, and Critics' Choice. He had lost all those awards. Russell Crowe was supposed to, quote unquote, go back to back. He was going to win that year again, and Denzel won. It was this perfect storm of Sidney Poitier getting the Lifetime Achievement Award that night. Halle Berry was going to do it, and then people were like, "Oh, we can do Denzel also." Perfect storm. It was a celebration of.
It's also funny, too, you know, as you say that, part of why I wasn't watching the Oscars that morning is I hadn't been nominated for any of those other prizes you put out. And so I just was like, I thought it was not in the world of possibility. But it was an incredibly wonderful experience. First of all, there's a handful of times in my life where I've made a really commercial movie that I love. Mm-hmm. You know, Dead Poets Society being one and Training Day being another, where it's just a movie a lot of people really enjoy and it's really good. Yeah. Like sometimes you make a movie that makes a lot of money or people like, but it's not that good. Yeah. It doesn't hold up, you know, the test of time. And I'm so proud of that movie, and I learned so much. And I remember, I believe it was Denzel that said it to me when I lost. He said, "Don't worry, you don't want to win it yet. You don't want to win it yet. It'll mean so much more. Yeah. He's like, you got a lot of good work to do." And it can, too much accolades can, I remember Phil Hoffman telling me that the 2 hardest things about our life were failure and success. That failure had been brutal on him, and success had been hard in a different way. He was the first one of my generation to win an Oscar. You know, he was the first of my peers to, like, not only did he win, he deserved it.
Yeah. It's great. It's a great year.
He just
Swept that season.
he flat out deserved it,
Yeah.
and it was like watching one of your contemporaries become fully mature artist, and he would talk pretty openly about the challenges of that, the way it affects your self-esteem and your ego in positive and negative ways that I think it's part of why it's so hard for young people, because it can kill your drive.
Yeah, especially if that happens like early on.
Yeah.
And just looking, and I tell everyone this, so your publicist knows this too. I always say you're not a great actor unless you have a few snubs under your belt.
Yeah.
So you have a few snubs under your belt. So if it were just like that one, I'd be like, you're okay. You were good that one time, but no, it's been great. I have 3 last questions for you before I do a quick rapid fire game. Your 2 of your 4 nominations are for Before Midnight and Before Sunset. You weren't nominated for Before Sunrise. It is one of 2 franchises, I believe, that gets better with each movie. The other one's Toy Story. All of them have gotten better each time. And I always want to know if there's a before in the middle of the night, or is there before? Is there another before at some point down the road, or do you think that's done?
It would be very the answer I usually give is that there's something about the 3 of them that does feel complete to me. The first one begins with us on a train listening to a couple in their mid-40s fighting, and the third one they turn into that couple.
Yeah.
And so it has a kind of, the circle feels complete to me. So I've always felt that if we were to do another one, it would be, we could visit Jesse and Celine, but it would be in some different capacity, meaning it would be the after series. Like we could do a different trilogy about a different point in life, or but part of what made the magic of those 3 is that the 3 of us were really in sync as writers.
Yeah.
We really wanted to say the same things with the movie, and so that could happen in one phone call. I could imagine getting an email from Julie saying, "Hey, can I talk to you too?" And something could catch fire.
It would be
the call could come from Rick. It could come from me. And we just don't want to outlive our fan base.
All right. Listen, them as grandparents could be a good
could be cool.
Be a good thing to explore. I wanted to ask you, just because of stuff that's in the news, I wanted to ask you about Tilly Norwood. I don't know if you've heard of her.
Mm-hmm.
She is the AI actor, quote unquote. Getting like reactions from people. What's been some of your feelings about this entity? And
well, I mean, this is what we're all living through. I have friends who are actuaries, and like, what's the future of finance? What's the future? All of our jobs. It's really, if you're a truck driver, like if more and more menus they want you to do on your phone, and it's a really profound existential crisis that we're putting ourselves through as we kind of seed our humanity, which is that for me, I got a painting on my wall, right? And it's incredible. My daughter's kindergarten class did a painting of Sun Ra, the god, right? And it's incredible. They worked on it all year. And at the end of the year, I said to the teacher, "What are you going to do with it?" And she's like, "Well, I guess we're just going to throw it away." And I was like, because it was huge. I was like, I'm framing that sucker, And it sits on everybody who comes over. It's like, that's incredible. What is that? And a computer could do that painting so much better, so much more efficiently. It could achieve everything about a portrait of the Sun Ra, right? But it wouldn't be made by people I know, and with the love and texture of a moment in time. Like, I could ride a motorcycle 26.2 miles and get there a lot faster than if I ran it. But I ran the marathon.
Yeah.
I did it. And when somebody writes a song, it's their song, and they did it, and we're witnessing their humanity. That it's this, this obsession with efficiency and greed and money making. That's what it is, and we're hurting ourselves with our own obsession about how we define what is progress. And so, yeah, you see it with this actor. Look, pretty soon we'll be able to see a new movie with James Dean. There'll be a new film starring James Dean. But here's the good news is young women will not be able to make out with said fictional James Dean character. And part of the fun of Titanic, I remember all the girls going to see it, is that they thought they're going to be able to, someday I'm going to kiss him.
Yeah.
And that's part of it. I remember my mom went to see the Beatles in 1964 in Fort Worth, and she got so disappointed in the crowd embarrassing themselves, screaming for John and Paul, that she gave her tickets away because she didn't want John and Paul to see her like that. She wanted to meet them on fair ground, not as some screaming fan. And I thought, well, that's part of what makes us go to concerts and go to the movies and want to meet painters and have dinner with novelists, and is to be in communication and dialogue with them. Yeah. It's not whether it's great or not. I mean, James Joyce is a great writer. Nobody reads it, right? I don't know.
I think to your point, I think most art is great because we fall in love with the imperfections just as much as we do with like the perfectness of it. So there's certain scenes that like happen in a movie that we hear stories about the
it's so true.
You can't
over and over again. We could cite so many lists of them down. What we love is the scratchy, sweaty stuff of real people, and we like to see hard work.
That's Ethan Hawke, star of Sony Pictures Classics' Blue Moon, which opens in select theaters on October 17 and then opens wide on October 24. After the break, Frankenstein star Oscar Isaac. From Los Angeles, this is the Variety Award Circuit Podcast. And we're back. It's the Variety Award Circuit Podcast. I'm Michael Schneider. In Guillermo del Toro's reimagining of Frankenstein, Oscar Isaac takes on the role of Victor Frankenstein, describing his performance as unexpectedly pleasurable despite the character's darkness. He even admitted to del Toro that he was concerned by how much he was enjoying portraying a man consumed by rage and obsession. Variety's Clayton Davis talks to Isaac about taking on one of the most prolific characters in all of literature, as well as finding family in Guillermo del Toro and why that has formed the way he thinks about who to say yes to in Hollywood. Clayton began by asking Isaac how he felt about his performance as he was in the middle of filming Frankenstein.
It's funny, like Christoph Waltz, who's in the film, I had asked him about, does he watch himself? Does he watch his takes? Because sometimes everybody has a different feeling of like whether they watch, a take after they do it or not. Go look at the monitor. And he said, no, I don't watch it. And I was like, well, why? He's like, well, because, it's like you watch it, it's, if you think it's bad, that's okay. But if you think it's good, then it's a real problem.
Yeah.
I guess because, then you're like, oh, I'm nailing it. I've got nothing to worry about. During it, I didn't necessarily feel like I'm nailing it. What I did feel was an immense amount of pleasure doing it, almost to the point where I was a little bit concerned. I remember talking to Guillermo and saying, like, hey, I didn't expect that playing this character was going to be so fun and joyful. I mean, it's some dark stuff. This guy's got a lot of rage. He's got a lot of damage. And yet I'm finding it really enjoyable, and it's surprising me. And he smartly said, he's like, well, maybe because you're playing a character that doesn't have any doubts. He not until he crashes, and he crashes hard right after he makes the creature. But, the whole first half of the movie, more of it, he's just doubtless about what he wants to do and what he needs to do, even though it's fueled by rage and resentment and defiance. It's still the feeling of freedom, of like doing whatever you need to do regardless of the consequences or the cost.
Very, very, very confident man in the world, very very sure of himself. And we've seen Frankenstein reimagined a lot over decades. My first Frankenstein, I think it's Kenneth Branagh's Frankenstein.
It kind of was mine too.
Yeah, I think we're about the same.
For me, like the trailer of like when Robert De Niro comes flying off with his trench coat flying behind him.
It's like hardcore.
Yeah.
It was like very scary at the time.
Frankenstein parkour.
Yeah. What did you go back and watch anything in particular, or were you just kind of like, listen, this is Guillermo, there is no like reference point for something like this?
I mean, I'd seen so many of them, and I wasn't afraid of looking at them. In the past, I've done a lot of Shakespeare, for instance, and like there's so many different versions that you can see. And in the past, when I would do a play, I would sometimes go back and read about other performances, and it's for me, information. It's not going to make me overly self-conscious. Sometimes I'm very quick to steal anything that I think is good or helpful. But with this one, it was so specific, and it's so specifically Guillermo, and it's so specifically his kind of taking in through osmosis and through just his sheer love over the many, many years, this book. And like Shakespeare, taking, for instance, the story of Hamlet from this like old, Scandinavian tale and making it completely something new. He kind of does the same thing with this. He absorbs all of it in spirit, but really refracts it through his own point of view. And so for me, it was just conversations with Guillermo and then finding different forms of inspiration that weren't literally, different Frankensteins.
Guillermo often says he casts actors who bring empathy to his monsters. So did you find yourself defending Frankenstein in your own head and defending the creature himself? Did you play with that balance?
Well, there wasn't, I guess so. I guess, sometimes I've heard people talk about, acting as like being a lawyer for the character, it's like you have to go in and you defend that character. I didn't find the need to defend him so much, which maybe speaks to me, my sociopathic tendencies.
I understand.
I was like, hey, I get him. He's got, he's got a lot on his mind. He's
trying to make a being.
Yeah, exactly. He had a mean dad. Of course he's going to be mean. No, it's like I think what was so fun about this character too is just the technical aspects of it. Guillermo quickly, when we started off, said this is not a naturalistic performance. This is not a character that's naturalistic. I need the speed of speech and the speed of thought to be heightened. It is, in a way, he's like a Jungian archetype. Now, you can't play an archetype, but the idea is that to lean in to his darkness, to his id going wild. There's something that's elemental about him. So the physical aspects of the character were really interesting to me, even more so than the psychological ones. Like the kind of fever dream that this guy is on, and also the fact that it's a story that he is telling about himself. So it's not necessarily true. It's not what he says. Some of it is fact, some is not, but it's all true. Meaning that this is what it felt like. When I was in my father's room, it felt like it was oversized. It felt like it was operatic, even if that wasn't the case.
I didn't even think about it that way, of him telling the story. It is his point of view, and it is probably the one interpretation that, he's a reliable narrator, but he's also like, it's his.
Well, I'd say he's very much an unreliable narrator. The fact that when that Elizabeth and his mother look exactly the same. It's played both by Mia Goth. I think that's because in his mind, that's the only woman he's ever seen is his mom. In fact, he's from the moment that his mom dies and he blames his father, that he kind of calcifies as a human being. And the person that we see throughout the movie is that same 12-year-old that was, completely wounded. And I think he basically, for me, it was helpful to look at it as the creation of the creature was him trying to reconstruct this child that in some ways died. And then it's too painful to even look at it. So he decides to try to destroy it. And this child, this resurrected child from the dead has to, chase him down to the ends of the earth to forgive him.
I have to ask about the hair man, because I'm both jealous and in awe of it. Is it your own? What? It is.
It's all donated.
It's a rock star, man. But was that always part of the look? Was that something that you and Guillermo discussed of how he would look?
Well, I've worked with my longtime hair technician, my hair artist, Tim Nolan. I've been working with him since 2017, really. So he's been part of every look for every character I've done. He's the one that came up with that Dune beard. He's and so one of the first things I do is talk to Tim.
Do you lend him out ever? Is he like a gift that you can give?
No,
it's just yours.
No, he works with a lot of amazing people, but so quickly we started talking about what we were thinking about, and obviously talking to Guillermo, and we came up with this look. There was quite a few different sketches, sometimes with facial hair, sometimes with not. How long would the hair be? And so that's just like a thing that we ended up dialing in, and. Yeah, I love it because it is Byronic. Yeah. It is, Guillermo and I talked a lot about him being much more like an artist than a scientist. Yeah. That he moves through space like a musician, like Prince, or like Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix, he was some of those costume ideas that Kate Hawley came up with were from Hendrix in the 60s.
Yeah, it's funny because I saw him and I was like, I feel like if Morrison had become like, Frankenstein in his day, like he would kind of look like this. It would be like the what he would wear, how he would move. It felt period, but it also felt contemporary. At the same time.
That's the thing. It's modern. These people were the punk rockers of their day, the romantics, like the Gothic romantics. They were really leading with emotion, and this is a highly emotional telling of the story, which is why I say it's a very Latin American telling of the story. And Victor, I think a big part of him is desire. His grasping for things, his deep wanting of things, and that kind of overtaking him, his want to defeat death, his want to prove himself, his want to have Elizabeth love him, all of that kind of overtakes him, and so he's unable to see when he's just succumbing to intense cruelty.
Yeah, awesome. I'm a big Oscar fan, so I have to go through just some highlights here from Drive to Most Violent Year, Star Wars The Last Jedi. You've balanced some indie grit, blockbuster scale, better than almost anyone that's in the game. But how do you decide what stories to give yourself to? And I don't think we ask that enough because that's a conscious decision that you have to make to give yourself to something.
Yeah, no, it is. It's kind of a giving over and time, the time that it takes to do these things. Frankenstein, it was 8 months. I think we did 105 days of shooting. That's a long one. I was very fortunate because, sometimes you don't know until you're in it with somebody what people are really like. And with Guillermo, it ended up being like finding a lost family member. I say it was like making a movie with my tia. Yeah. It was. We just synchronized in a really intense way. I think not a day's gone by where we don't speak since then. But that's rare. I think. But that is a big thing now moving forward, which is who am I going to spend my time with? It's not enough that it's a good character in a good script with a good director. It's who am I going to be living life with? Who am I going to be disrupting the routine of my family to go off somewhere and collaborate with? And I think that for me at the moment is what I'm curious about. And as far as like the actual material, it's tough. It's like falling in love, I've rarely ever been like, I want to do this kind of thing and then go and do that kind of thing. Sometimes this thing finds me, and I find that somehow this story that I'd never thought of before is reflecting something that's happening in my life in the moment.
The way you describe Guillermo is something I spoke to him about in Toronto. He's one of the, and it's not always a given, which some people get surprised about, he's one of the few filmmakers that the way he loves movies permeates like from him, like when you talk to him, and he's loved in this industry in a way that I don't see a lot of people like really loving a director. And first time I really felt it was obviously The Shape of Water year. And for a movie that anyone else would have directed, I think would have been dismissed. Otherwise they were like, nope, Guillermo touched it. I have to give it a shot. And they did. And it was great. How do you feel that love of movies through him? Like when you're sitting with him on set, is that the same? Because if I sit with him and talk about movies, we can talk for hours about it. But is it also like that on set that or does he operate at a different type of director level? Like how does that show itself on set?
It's infectious.
Is it?
His joy for what's happening, his joy for the craft. I think it's also like you get what you give, and he's an incredibly generous person with other filmmakers, with other movies. I don't think I've ever heard him talk shit about another movie. He's so much more interested in the things that he loves than the things that he hates. And I know so many people that it's the opposite. For most people it tends to be the opposite.
We've read some interviews recently with some people talking about it.
But he's like, he's just not interested. It's boring to it's too easy for him to talk about the stuff he does. Like, it's much more interesting and exciting to share about the things that he loves. And it's the same thing on set. He's incredibly open, and also it's people that he's worked with for 30 years. So it is a family. It is a collaboration of people.
That's Oscar Isaac, star of Netflix's Frankenstein, which gets a limited theatrical release on October 17 and streams starting November 7. And that's it for this edition of Variety's Award Circuit Podcast. Michael Schneider is the producer. Be sure to subscribe to the Award Circuit Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you download podcasts. Also, head on over to Variety.com and click on the Award Circuit tab to find the latest awards predictions and key races, as well as your daily fix of news, analysis, and reviews. For Jazz Tanke, Janelle Riley, and Clayton Davis, I'm Michael Schneider, and we'll see you on the circuit.